Many people here, it's fantastic. Welcome everybody. My name is Miriam, and myself, Neda, Sara, and Clementine, who's all the way in Guadeloupe, are here to talk to you and introduce you to the fascinating world of eye tracking. From those few sentences, you might have deducted that I come from Ireland. And there's a very good Irish-American saying, or a song, that starts with these lines. When Irish eyes are smiling, sure, it's like the morning in spring. But there's also a second version of that. It's when Irish eyes are smiling, they're probably up to something. Because your eyes tell you an awful lot. You can read an awful lot from your eyes. And everybody from philosophers to poets over the centuries have talked about the meaning of what we can see through our eyes. They've been called the windows to our souls and the keys to our thoughts and a look into our brains. So why am I here at a tech conference talking about poetry and philosophy? Well, we do actually work for a tech company. We work for a company called Tobii. It was founded in 2001. We have our headquarters here in Sweden, but we have 14 offices all over the globe. We are now over 600 employees, and we are on the stock market as well. And we have a mission, our mission, to improve the world with technology that understands human attention and intent. And that means human attention and intent. We need to keep asking ourselves the question, what can we see through our eyes? Are our eyes windows? What can we understand through our eyes? And how do we get technology to work in harmony with our eyes and what we can see? And this area has developed enormously over the last decades. So things like speech recognition, touch on your computer, things like that have meant that machines can actually understand what we want without us telling them. And our challenge is to evolve that and develop that even further. So what we're going to talk about today is something that we call computer vision or attention computing. And first of all, we're going to go through the technology behind it. And then we're going to show you a little bit of what data we can gather from that technology. And then at the end, we're going to talk about some use cases that we can use that for. So this is an example of some of the use cases. I'm not going to go into them. We're going to go through a little bit more here today with you. But to me, when I started this company, it felt like it was magic. I didn't say, how can we do this? How does it work? But it's not magic. We're going to show you here today. And with that, I'm going to leave over to Neda, who will show you a little about the technology behind the magic.
Thank you, Miriam. So, a little about the technology we have in Tobii and what lies behind the eye tracking. So, what is eye tracking exactly, and how do we do it? One thing that is important when we do eye tracking is how to evaluate the eye tracking signal. Another is a set of challenges we have in terms of adaptability, in what context the eye tracking works, and so on. And also then the eye trackers come in different forms and shapes. So I will go through all of those and then tie that into the bigger field of attention computing. So a typical eye tracker has a number of cameras. Could be one, could be more. You have illuminators, and with that you get pictures of the eyes with those illuminators, and we take that and run some algorithms to generate the signal that we call gaze, or the eye tracking, the main eye tracking signal. So if you see in this picture, this girl is looking at the screen, and we want to know exactly where she's looking at. Once we have an image of the eye, we use these illuminators which have been shone onto the eye, which show up in the image, to track the gaze. So we compare those illuminator positions to where the pupil in the eye is from the image, and from that compute a line of gaze. So that is very roughly said, but that's what we work with all day. So the next thing is, once we have this signal, how do we evaluate it? We have a number of ways of evaluating, but again, very high level. If we were to look at it, we could have gaze, or the signal that is perfect. It's on the spot most of the time, but sometimes it's not, so it's very noisy. So for that, we say it has good accuracy but poor precision. You see that on the right-hand side on the top. Or you have perfect precision and perfect accuracy. The gaze is always good. This is a good performance. Or we have good accuracy, poor accuracy and poor precision. That's definitely a no-go zone. So that's a little bit about how we need to evaluate this signal. So any signal we generate, we need to have a way of evaluating it. Now, some of the challenges we face on a daily basis is that the eye tracking usually works when you have perfect conditions, when you have eyes that are looking at the camera, they're well open, a nice face shape, everything. That all works well. But when you have droopy eyes, when you have different eye shapes, when you have different illumination, there's tons of different conditions. And for that, it's difficult to cover everyone all the time. But that is what we need to do. Because imagine if this is used under surgery, for example. You don't want it to fail, right? And that is one thing that makes our job interesting and challenging at the same time. Then it's adaptability of geometry. These eye trackers are placed in so many different devices. And each of those devices have their own geometry. How is it best suited to that geometry? How do we do that? So that's also a part of the challenges we have. Another thing, high performance under all conditions. If we have a set of glasses, for example, they need to work outside in the sunshine, inside in the darkness, in the cold, in the warm, any kind of situation you can think of. So performance under all conditions. And then also, another thing is that sometimes, for the gaze, for example, it's relatively easy to get a ground truth. So if you want to test something, you tell a person to look at a fixed point. You have to rely that they do that. Sometimes they don't. But you use that as your ground truth to evaluate how good am I in finding this signal. But if you don't have that, you have other signals that you don't have ground truth for. How do you evaluate that? And for that, what we do, in addition to the images that we collect, are to generate synthetic images. So that's also part of the fun job we do, to generate synthetic images. And that below you see some synthetic images. Above you see examples of cases we have to handle with very interesting cases, which are very difficult to do eye tracking on. So, some just overview info about the challenges. So once we have these eye trackers, they come in different forms and shapes. We usually classify them in 3 groups. We call them screen-based eye trackers, wearable eye trackers, and webcam-based eye trackers. The 2 first categories are more or less working the way I explained, with the illuminators and the cameras and so on. The 3rd category doesn't rely on any camera other than the webcam you have in your computer, for example. Takes those images, no illuminators, and converts that into gaze. And that's a little bit of a different technology. That's mostly end-to-end machine learning we use there. So these different categories of eye trackers that we have have use cases in different fields. Screen-based ones are usually mounted on monitors or come in individual devices which have them integrated in them. They're used in research mostly, but also, for example, if you use your monitor to know whether you're present or not, and to turn off if you're not present, and so forth, and also in gaming. So you have a gaming monitor in front of you that has an eye tracker mounted onto it. So those are some use cases for that group of work. And then we have wearable devices. If you've used an AR set of glasses or a VR headset, some of those have eye tracking integrated in them for various reasons. It's both under the hood for different things that are done in those headsets, but also, for example, to track the gaze so that you can have a more interactive way of playing a game. You can control things with your gaze in a VR headset, for example. And then webcam-based ones, where, for example, we have a product where you look at the screen, and from that, marketing research knows where you're looking at the screen and uses that information to design a better web page. So these are some of the different types. We are organized around these categories, and so I personally work in the wearable part, and I work with XR, meaning VR and AR headsets. And we have the other ones that I just went through as well. So Now I've told you a little bit about eye tracking and gaze and computing just this one signal, which is gaze, but we do a lot more than that. So if we have this hardware, illuminator, cameras, and the processing, we have a set of what we call core signals. And one of them is the eye tracking or gaze signal, but we have a number of others. When we have these images of the eye, there is a lot more information we can basically extract from that. For example, eye openness. How open is the eye? Head pose, if we have the image of the whole head and it's a remote device, we can look at where is the head facing, what directions, that's the head pose. Presence, is this person present or not? That's a signal. Facial landmarks, and also Face ID. So these are also some of the other core signals that we generate, either at the same time or separately. But from these signals, what we come to are a bit higher level. They're attention signals. So how can we use this gaze? Okay, we see some use cases, but how can it all be combined with other things, and how can it be used further? So some attention signals, for example, are you could recognize if a person is drowsy by looking at their eyes, both their gaze and the openness or closeness of their eyes. So the gaze signal and the eye openness you can use for detecting drowsiness. You have saccades, like a person moving their eyes at a fast speed, fixations, if a person is looking at a specific point, object selection, extended view, distraction, and cognitive load. And also emotions, of course. So this whole field of attention computing. Now, these also bring user values, different user values in the examples I told you before, but there's a whole list here as well. I won't really go through more user values because after me, Clementine will actually go through cognitive load and how we evaluate that using eye tracking and gaze. And these examples I have brought here, we will talk about again further down the line, so I can skip those. So Clementine, do you... Yes, we don't hear you. Yes?
Yes. Okay, thanks a lot, Nida. I would have loved to be with you all on stage, but still very happy to share this moment with you from here. I'm a biomedical engineer. I'm really passionate about developing technologies to help humans to improve health and safety. And first, I will introduce why at Tobii we are interested in the monitoring of cognitive states. And for that, I will use a short video.
It's obvious that our physiological and cognitive states, drowsiness, stress, cognitive load, distraction, or mind-wandering, directly affect our performance and increase the risk of human error. Detecting these states enables to improve performance, strengthen safety, promote well-being, and enhance the user experience. Let's take a few examples. This is Max. Max is a truck driver. As the miles pass by, fatigue sets in and the risk of drowsiness may occur. In her control room, Sarah monitors a multitude of settings relating to a chemical factory's operation. The flow of information is huge and requires a very high level of concentration. Tom is an airline pilot. Despite his considerable experience and knowledge of procedures, the slightest unforeseen event may lead to critical and urgent decision-making, causing a very high level of stress. And Julia works for a laboratory that processes hazardous substances. To train safely, she follows virtual reality e-learning sessions. Once in the lab, nothing can be left to chance. At any time, each of these people may experience a physiological or cognitive state that affects their ability to perform a task or make a decision properly.
So as you've seen from this video, there are several situations for which being in a specific cognitive state could have a really bad impact on safety, well-being, and user experience. So therefore, being able to better understand human cognitive states and behavior could be of really great and high value for many use cases. But now the question that you might ask yourself is how? How can we monitor cognitive states? Can go to the next slide. And as Miriam and Nida already explained, the eye reflects what is happening in the brain. And therefore, the eyes and their behavior give a lot of relevant information and indicators about human states. I go to the next slide. And so thanks to cameras placed in different types of devices, like Nida explained, and thanks also to the power of eye tracking, we are able to extract relevant indicators related, for example, to the dynamic of eye openness, so how you open and close your eyes, which is the velocity of the reopening and the closing of the eye, or some indicators related to gaze behavior, to also, the size of the pupil, and a lot of different other parameters that you can extract from the eye. And these indicators are then used in order to determine several cognitive states. And on the next slide, you can see that for more than 10 years now, we have developed a unique expertise in understanding physiological and cognitive states of operators of human being in general, such as drowsiness, stress, cognitive load, or mind wandering. And so we have therefore developed advanced solutions for detecting these states using eye tracking data as inputs. And these solutions are developed using a combination of AI, artificial intelligence, but also some more traditional approaches integrating our expertise. And this expertise is multidisciplinary, and it goes beyond only engineering, because it's a matter of understanding human states and complexity. So it also includes a bit of medicine, neurology, the sleep medicine for drowsiness, for example, and also a lot of human factors. That's the next slide. And so, monitoring these states and thus being able to provide insights about an individual's attention level enable to unlock profound insights, to deliver incredible experiences, and also to enable innovative devices. And that in many applications. So in the next slide, you can see that our solutions really enable to improve human performance, safety, well-being, and user experience in a lot of applications. And these are applications that require some interaction between an individual and an equipment, for example, or a content, such as in automotive, where we want to be able to improve safety, and so to perform some driver monitoring. But it can also be used in gaming in order to detect how engaged a player is in his game, and maybe to adapt dynamically the game, or to extract also some very useful statistics. Next slide, please. So when we talk about monitoring cognitive states, there are a bunch of challenges that we need to cope with. One of them is that physiological and cognitive states are not binary. They are not black or white. They are progressive. So for instance, before a driver falls asleep, he will be in a state somewhere between fully awake and fully drowsy, falling asleep. And so that's quite challenging to define key performance indicators for the ability to specifically detect such states. And in addition to that, there is no fully objective single ground truth for each state, and there probably never will be. So, when we talk about human states, it's in a way very difficult to know exactly in which specific level of, for example, drowsiness, or which level of cognitive load an individual is. There is no objective and unique truth about this. And some ground truths will give only some punctual measurements. Others are, subjective. We ask people how they feel about their states. Some are also not a direct measurement of the states. So no single ground truth will ever meet all the requirements for developing and validating a particular state. And this makes the development and also the validation process of cognitive state monitoring systems rather tricky. Can go on the next slide. And so we have therefore developed at Tobii a specific expertise and strategy to develop and validate our solutions for cognitive states monitoring. And this strategy is based on a multidisciplinary approach. This approach includes combining several ground truths to reliably characterize the state of an individual and therefore to develop and validate our solutions. So we perform the development and the validation of our solution using scientific evidence-based techniques by setting up specific data collections in the context. So for example, if we're in the automotive context and that we want to monitor if a driver is not falling asleep, what we do is to perform some tests in driving simulator, because we can induce also a bit of drowsiness in people in a more, let's say, safe way without risk. But we also perform some tests in real driving conditions, because at the end, the goal is to be able to verify that the solution is working properly in the field, in the operational environment. And when we do that kind of data collection, we collect a lot of different types of data. So physiological data, such as brain activity, for example, behavioral data, performance-based data. So participants are performing some tasks, so we are also collecting information about how they perform in their tasks. And of course, we also use some self-assessment. And when we combine all these data, then we can more, let's say, easily characterize the state in which the person is. And this enables us to develop our solutions, to be able to label also our data, and then, of course, to validate them. And for years now, we have built very valuable databases for the different cognitive states that we are interested in. So I've been working in this field for 12 years now, and I really like being part of this great adventure, which aims to develop technologies that enable a better understanding of how we behave, of how we feel, and with that goal of improving safety, of improving well-being, and improving also the user experience. And now Sarah will tell you a little bit about research with eye tracking. Is that right, Sarah?
Yes, exactly. So I am Sara Better, and I have been working with our software products for scientific research for almost 12 years now. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about our vision, how it works, and eye tracking research in general, and also about some difficulties that may appear if you are a researcher and trying to do your research. Yes, thank you, Miriam. Let me see how this works, like that. Okay, so how do we see the world? When humans and a lot of other animals look at something as seen, we don't see the entire scene. We fixate at small specific points, and when we fixate, when the eye is steady, we produce a very sharp but very small part of the scene in our brain. And then we move the eye very rapidly, it's called saccades, to the next point of fixation. And together, this builds up sort of a three-dimensional map of this scene in our brain. So we think that we see the entire world sharply, but in fact, most of it is in our imagination, more or less. And it's also very different how we look at things depending on the context or the task that we have been given. So this image that you see now, it has been used in some famous eye tracking experiments. And before the participants in this study the picture was shown to them, they were given different tasks. And here we can see the gaze pattern depending on the task. I don't know if you can read these tiny letters in the back, so don't try. So what we see here is the fixation points connected with a black line to the next fixation point. And it produces these gaze patterns. So you can see the first one, is it left or right of the real image? It's the free examination. So when they just look, not randomly, they just freely look. But you can see it's a quite different pattern if they were told to tell the ages of the persons in this picture. Then you can see that we see sort of the faces of the humans in this picture, in the gaze pattern. And also it's a task where they are supposed to remember how the people are dressed. Then we can see actually the persons in this image. And when we read, of course, we also, do fixations and saccades. And when we do a saccade, we are almost blind in some sense. And that explains why we are so easily fooled by a text like this one. And maybe some of you have seen this before. It's a classic. And what does it say? Yeah, exactly. So we read Paris in the spring, but it says Paris in the spring. But we don't see that. And especially when it's divided into lines like this, I'm not sure that if you had been tricked if I didn't do that. But it's very fascinating that we are blind during saccades, because when we know what someone is looking at, we can determine on the moment they are doing the saccade. And if we, at that moment, replace big parts of what they are seeing, they don't see that. So let's pretend we are showing them a picture of a room, and when they are doing the saccade, we change the color of the walls. And they will not see that. They will not notice. But everyone around who are not doing a saccade at that moment, they will see like, oh, it changed, but they will not. And I work with a product called Tobii ProLab, and I'm a software developer. And a lot of eye tracking experiments are done at universities. And then the typical participant is a student at that university. They put up an ad and they can buy and so on, get a movie ticket for the travel. But what if your participants are not this, but this? So eye tracking is a very important tool when doing baby research, because we cannot ask babies how they see the world or how they perceive the world. But if we can see what they see, then we can draw conclusions out of that. So I will show you Tobii ProLab now in a second. And the idea behind the study I'm going to show you is that as adults, we know that if something like this one, if it moves like this and then it moves behind some kind of obstacle, we know that it will most likely appear on the other side like this, right? But is this something that babies know? And the little experiment that I'm going to show you now, it will tell. So this is ProLab, and it's a software where researchers can design experiments, record experiments, and analyze experiments. So what we see here is the designer part, and they can set up a timeline that will then later be presented to the participant. And this is a simple study with 2 videos, and they are, just like I told you, it's moving objects and funky music because it's for babies. And this one, it repeats. And we also have another one that is similar, but it moves vertically instead of horizontally. So this is shown to babies, and now I will show you a recording with a baby. Yeah, they are so cute, right? And wait until it starts moving and looking. Okay, so what we see here, we see the video, obviously, but also we see the red dot here. It's where this baby fixates at this moment, and then it's a little trail here, so we know the history. And I will play it now, and you will see. So we can see here that this is a attention grabber if it loses focus. But we can see here that it seems to follow this. And what we want to know in this study, we differ between, now I must check this, predictive and reactive responses. So a predictive response is when we look from the time the object sort of reappears, if we look at it within 200 milliseconds from that, it's called a predictive response. It's like we could understand that it will appear. Whereas if we look later, it's a reactive response. And this little eye, it's hidden behind this obstacle for 700 milliseconds. So that means that if we look at it within 900 milliseconds, it will be a predictive response. And we want to know if babies and adults have the same sort of prediction rate. So we do some more recordings with more babies and also some adults, of course, so we can compare. And then we can analyze the data like this. So what you see here is data from one of these repetitions. And it's divided, so we have the baby data here and the adult data here. And it's time to first visit. So from the time that this eye moved behind this obstacle until the participant looked at it again, right? So I have put the reference line here at 900 because that was the limit for predictive responses. And we can see that both babies and adults had a lot of, I keep forgetting this word all the time, predictive responses, but also some reactive. And if we do a more, and then it's more data like this, and also it's the green, this green series says incorrect, but it's because we have these two versions, right, where it could move horizontal, and sometimes they don't know which one it is. So. But this is still sort of a predictive response because it thought it would end up there, right? But if we analyze all this data, we can see that actually 9-month-old babies, they have sort of the same prediction rate as adults. So now we know that babies do understand this about moving objects. But what if your participant is not this, but that? And unfortunately, I don't have time to tell you about monkey research today. But I can tell you that if you are doing monkey research, be sure to put some kind of plexiglass between the monkey and the eye tracker, otherwise it will be broken in a second. And also we have implemented a procedure for calibrating the eye tracker so we get the correct accuracy and so on for babies. So it's basically a video with a lot of colors and some funky music and that. And apparently also monkeys love to watch this little animation. And some of my closest colleagues, they are not software developers as I. They are actually eye tracking researchers. And that is what makes my work so fun, to together with them create solutions for all these different aspects of research. And yeah, I really love working with them. And this is almost the end of our presentation, but I will hand over to Miriam for some last words.
Thank you, Sarah. So I hope you've enjoyed a little bit a short view into the world of eye tracking and attention computing as well. And we were discussing a little bit before this as to, well, why do we like working with this actually? Why did we choose to work for Tobii as well? And despite the fact that we think Tobii is a fantastic culture, that definitely makes us enjoy our day. But the main reason that we chose to work for Tobii, I think, is that we feel that we make an impact in the world, that actually the things we do improve the world around us. And that's quite important for us as well. And whether we're talking about helping children who have reading disabilities or enabling people with severe disabilities to do things that they've never been able to do before, our equipment does that and helps people with that. But it also does things like improving qualities in assembly lines as well, in factories. That's also an important thing. And also important that we are making a better gaming experience for people, for entertainment as well. All those things actually improve the world around us, and all the multitude of other things that you can use eye tracking for. But we are at a tech conference, so of course we're talking about tech. We also have some cool tech. So it is really inspiring and innovative to be working in this area. So I hope you get the opportunity to look a little bit more. We do have a stand outside, so please visit it. And with that, thank you very much for listening.